All right. So today, um, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about dry fire and what dry fire tools and um, methods I think are good and which ones aren't. So to start off, I'm going to start off by saying what things you probably should have. You need a gun, right? I think that's all. At the end of the day, that's really the main thing you need to do effective dry fire practice is a gun and something to aim at. For a long time, I just used light switches because they're, in your house anyway, so may as well use them as target practice, I guess. um, but you've seen before, I've shown off some little cardboard targets and stuff that I've got cut out, and I just cut them out of cereal boxes or whatever and use those. So I'd recommend doing something like that. Just cut out some USPSA or IPSC or whatever style target you want to use. Some smaller versions of them, hang them up on a wall, uh, put them wherever, make a stage out of them in your house if you want. But yeah, do that. Those are the two things that are kind of mandatory. Again, something to aim at. Doesn't have to be the targets. You can just use light switches, but I like the little cardboard targets. And then the other thing I would say is worth having for dry fire practice is maybe some dedicated dry fire mags. So I've shown them on here before, but I've got a couple of 21 round P mags that I just stuffed with some dummy rounds that a buddy of mine loaded up. Shout out trash shooters. um, but yeah, that's really all I use. I don't think it's super necessary to get more than that. So a lot of people do get more than that. There's a lot of other things on the market. Those laser cartridges are pretty popular. Things like the Mantis system are pretty popular. And there's like CO2 barrels that are supposed to give you simulated recoil, stuff like that. I would say save your money and don't buy any of that. And the reason I say that is twofold, kind of. One is a lot of those things are pretty expensive. Like some of the Mantis systems are, a couple, 300 bucks. And frankly, you could just buy a lot of ammo for that money. Like people make a big deal out of, ammo being expensive, and then they waste a lot of money on stupid stuff like Mantis system. So I would say skip the Mantis system, save your 200 bucks. You go use that 200 bucks to buy a case of 9 mil and just do dry fire training without the Mantis. And then you have dry fire and you have 1,000 rounds of live fire versus, you spend a couple $100 on the Mantis system and all you get is more dry fire that may or may not be any better. And I'd say it's really not any better. I don't think you need a laser to show you where your shots are going to be. If you've been doing practical shooting for really any significant amount of time, you should figure out how to call your shots. If that's not a skill you've learned yet, learn it, and that's going to do you way, like, just, it's going to do you magnitudes more of a service than having a laser come out of your barrel. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And I know a lot of people like those systems, but frankly, I just don't find them necessary. So another thing that like I messed around with a little bit was an airsoft clock. I don't I don't think it's that worth it really. Like it was pretty cheap. It was like $100, but like in terms of actually growing your shooting skill, I think you're probably better off just not doing that and just dry firing with a gun. Because what ends up happening a lot of times when I do try to incorporate that thing into a practice session, and I do still use it a little bit. For one, the like air like CO2 blowback recoil is not enough to really simulate a like an actual centerfire handgun recoil. Like it's just not the same. So I don't think you're really getting any benefit there. And then, that accuracy of those things isn't that spectacular. Like inside of 10 yards, it's accurate enough to use as a training tool, but really beyond that, it's just too inaccurate to be a very useful training tool. And also, I can't mount a red dot to the particular one that I have, so that's annoying. If I could mount a red dot to it, I'd like it a lot more, but whatever. It's good to practice with iron sights a little bit too. So when I want to practice with iron sights, that's usually how I do it. But yeah, I would say you're best off just using a gun. And if you have something like a Glock where your trigger, you're cocked for the first shot, but then after the first shot, the trigger doesn't reset without the slide racking. Some people think that means they need to like rack the slide between every shot. That's stupid. Don't do that, because then you're never going to be able to practice like 3/4 of the things that are important to practice in dry fire. Target transitions and movement and stuff like that. Yeah, just pull the trigger again. That's what I do when I dry fire with a Glock that's still got like the stock trigger in it. I've got one Glock that's got a Timney trigger in it, so that like resets all the time. I do kind of like that for dry fire, but it's not necessary. I would say just pull this again. Try to be honest with yourself and use like at least as much force as it would take to set the trigger off. I usually press them pretty hard in dry fire, just because if I'm pressing it like extra hard in dry fire and my grip is good enough that the sights aren't moving around, then I should be pretty confident that when I move into dry or live fire and I don't have to press the trigger quite as hard to get the gun to go off as I'm doing in dry fire, my grip should be good enough that my sights aren't being disturbed by my trigger pull. So Ben Stagger talks about that quite a bit. This isn't my own ideas. This is mostly his ideas when it comes to dry fire. But you should check him out too if you aren't watching his stuff already. Yeah, so that's kind of how I do dry fire. One system that is kind of interesting to me is the Ace VR stuff. I've heard some pretty good things about that from some really good shooters, so I wouldn't mind giving that a try at some point. It's a little bit of a tough sell to me, if I'm being honest, because I don't feel like it's going to really be any more beneficial than regular dry fire. But it is fairly expensive. It's several $100s for getting that system if you don't have a VR system already, which I don't. So I don't know that that's like entirely worth it. I would say if you're like on the fence about it, I'd say skip it and put the money towards ammo, because at the end of the day, like live fire practice is gonna be better than like Ace VR practice generally, I would say. So that's kind of my thoughts on all of that stuff. Don't worry about your trigger not resetting. Don't rack the slide between shots. Just set up a drill, set up an array with some transitions and stuff in there, and just go for it. If you want to practice reloads, have some dummy rounds and dry fire mags that are stuffed with those, or some companies even make like weighted dry fire mags. You could get those too. I think something like that's worth it for practicing reloads. The rest of those like dry fire, I'm going to call them gimmicks, I just wouldn't waste your time with. So hopefully this can be some good information for anybody who's on the fence about getting some of that stuff. I would say save your money and put it towards other things that will help you more in your shooting journey. Also, at the time of this video, this isn't a political channel at all, but as many of you know, Charlie Kirk was assassinated a couple days ago, and I just want to say that that's awful, and pray for this country, because there's people out there who really need it, and seeing people celebrating his death is just absolutely disgusting, and it's very saddening that we've come to a time in this country that people will celebrate the death of others that they disagreed with. So don't be like them. Pray for the country. Pray for the people who think that way, that, think that killing their political opponents is somehow a good idea. And if Charlie was a very outward Christian, and I would encourage you that if you don't know Jesus, to consider inviting him into your life, because it's because of Jesus that we know that Charlie is in a better place now, even though I would say this world is left much worse without him. So probably not gonna talk about politics much on this channel, but I did want to say that because it's been a heavy time in this country. So anyway, without further ado, let me know what you think about dry fire stuff. Let me know if you have good experiences with some of the things that I said were useless, and I'll catch you all in the next one.